Hello, can anybody hear me? Um, Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to anyone who's joining. We will be starting fairly shortly. We're just having a little practice with some slides because we had a few technical issues this morning. So, how are we doing, team? Can we joined? Where's Jill then? Hello, hi. Just bear with us just for a few minutes while we get set up. I'm very sorry about this. We did have a few issues when we ran this session earlier on today. So Jill is still in the background. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Um, I'm just going to have a very, very brief introduction because we've got a lot to get through. Having already sat through this session once today, you're in for a really special experience. I'd like to briefly introduce Deborah Roberts and Jill Budgell to you. Macmillan have worked with Deborah and Jill over a number of years. They are experts in their fields. They will talk a little bit about themselves and go through their slides for you, but you do use the chat as they're going through. Ask any questions, even if we're not covering maybe specific areas for you that you would like us to go through. Pop something in the chat, and it might be that we will make another webinar about that particular area. Do get engaged with what you're going to hear. And I'm going to hand over now to Jill, who's going to go through the first session on literacy.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and thanks everyone who was perhaps involved in our testing that we were just having to do. We were just keen to make sure that once we started, we were up and running. It's a good evening. I can see people from Oman and Colombia and Abu Dhabi. So welcome everybody wherever you are to this short session where we're going to talk about language literacy, maths and science. In fact, of course, in the UK, we don't call it science in early years as such, or in primary. We call it in early years, we call it understanding the world. And I know once my colleague Deborah starts talking about maths and science, that's exactly what she's going to be talking about, understanding the world. But I'm here to talk about literacy and language. And in fact, I thought it was useful to start with to remind us that in early years, of course, we're not separating the subjects. Learning is all around, it's engaging, it's the bedrock of the children's world. It's all about learning in the world. Make it playful, hands-on, and ultimately my message is take turns. It's better together. Whatever you're doing with your children, and I'm assuming lots of you are parents, but you might be teachers as well. You might want to put something like that in the chat box. Taking it in turns is more effective than one person doing all the talking, reading, or writing, or one person working alone. And another reminder just before we start is that learning is not in a straight line. Even as adults, we know that learning has its ups and downs, and we might think we know something one day and then we don't know it the next day. And children are exactly the same. They need lots of practice and revisiting of learning. And so progress is often can look a bit erratic, to be honest, particularly with little children. And it can be very granular. So progress may be small. So we don't go from children not knowing their name to knowing their name. There's lots of little steps. And you can see in these pictures I've put here, we need to give them visual clues to start with. So they might have a picture on their coat peg with their name. And activities might involve looking at these name cards where they've got their picture and their name. And perhaps they have to take that card to different places in the house or the classroom to match it, to make sure perhaps it's got the same shape at the beginning, or perhaps they can see the whole name looks the same. But over time, they begin to get much more familiar with being able to recognize their name in lots of different situations. And this is progress. So we really want to encourage recognition of progress, even when it's a tiny step. And I think as parents, you can help enormously with that. Another reminder really is that it's not just about reading. I think in the early years, sometimes we get really waylaid with this. Of course, reading is hugely important, but it's about listening and speaking and writing, because ultimately we want the children to have a lifelong pleasure of reading and writing, and we want them to be confident listeners and speakers. And so these things all intermesh. They need to know how to enjoy reading, but also to learn how to read. They need to learn the pleasure of writing, but the mechanics of holding that pencil and writing the letters. And these things you can definitely work with the school on together in tandem. So let's look at some of the things that make up this whole picture of preparing your children for school, and even when they've started, because obviously we're a little bit into the school term now. So number one is fantastic, share great books. You will probably recognise some of these. You may have a little library in the classroom, or at home you may have some little bookshelves with the children's favourite stories. These are some of the classic English favourites. Brown bear, what do you see? I see a blue balloon looking at me, or whatever. And Dear Zoo, and we've also got traditional tales. Now, many of these books you may also want to share in your home language. And I will stress this throughout, that particularly in the early years, it's really important that children are stable in their home language or languages, and there's no harm at all in sharing books in English and sharing books in your home language. So you might do Little Red Riding Hood in different languages at different times, and that's really, really valuable and important. But it's not just a question always of just picking up a picture book and reading it to your child. Those picture books aren't meant for children to read alone. The language is too sophisticated, it's too difficult. So it really is about sharing those kind of books. But it's not just reading aloud. Remember what I said about taking it in turns. So if you can have this kind of conversation where you're using the question words, what, why, where, who, when, and open the questions up, you can begin to have an interactive read aloud. So it might go along the lines of, what is it? Perhaps you're pointing to a picture in a book. That's right, it's a balloon. It's a big balloon. What colour is it? And we're assuming the child is responding. That's right, it's a big red, and the child might say, balloon. That's a really important thing to be able to do, to leave that gap for them to fill in. And then you might say, can you say big red balloon? And they copy it. And then you might say, where did we see a balloon yesterday? That's right, we saw a big red balloon in the park. I wonder is a lovely phrase to use with your children. I wonder where that big red balloon went or floated to. So these kind of conversations are really, really rich, and will help you to get the most from those books. I'm just having a quick look in the greetings from Uruguay. I'm just having a quick look in that box. Thank you, Nab. She says she loves the slides. Thank you, thank you. Do pop any questions in there as I'm talking, because as you can see, I'm going to keep a quick eye on that, but at the same time, keep an eye on time, because we've got a lot to get through. Okay, so I hope that's a helpful tip to really think about using those open questions to really interrogate the picture. The other important thing is to play with letter sounds. This is in teacher speak, this is phonological awareness. It's playing with the sounds of the language. And you don't need to learn new things for this. You may be familiar with games like I Spy with My Little Eye, something beginning with, we don't say P as in the letter name. It's much more helpful if you can say, I spy with my little eye, something beginning with, and you say the letter sound, and then the child might say picture, for example. Or you may do I hear with my little ear something beginning with B, not B. So understanding that we're using letter sounds is really helpful if you're doing these kind of games at home. It doesn't mean you're not singing alphabet songs and learning the alphabet with your child, but for reading, letter sounds is more productive, more helpful. There might be games like Simon Says, put your hands in the air if you can see something beginning with L, as in lamp, that kind of thing. And of course, if you don't say Simon Says at the beginning, then the children shouldn't put their hands in the air. That's the game. You might do things like, what word am I saying? So you could sound out a simple word like s, I, t. And the child has to think, sit. Oh, sit. So it's not reading, it's not writing, it's actually listening and merging those sounds to understand that word. And then they have to do it. There's other words you can do, like do these two words rhyme, and you might have hat and cat, or you might have hat and pen. No, they don't rhyme. Just to get children understanding that concept. And you can do things like odd one out as well. So you could say, listen to these words. Which ones? So I'm just moving my chat box a little bit. Which words have the air sound in them? And you could say to your child, air, stare, surf, and chair. Oh, which one is the odd one out? And obviously it's surf. So we have air, st, air, ch, air, and surf. Surf doesn't rhyme, does it? And you can play those kind of simple games very easily. So have some fun with letter sounds and rhyme. But at the same time, we do need to teach the children, the letter shapes and the sounds and how they match. And this is where the phonics comes in. So you may, if your child has started school, be very familiar with phonics. Could you pop in the chat box for me so that I can see if anyone is familiar with the term? I can see we've got some teachers here as well, so I know you'll be familiar with phonics. But just pop in there for me if you're a parent and you're familiar. I'll carry on chatting. Looks like people are being a little bit shy, but don't be. Please do put questions in. So the phonics is really about understanding that the letter that has the S shape makes the letter sound S, for example. And as I just mentioned in that previous game, we're not saying S. We're not putting that on the end, which we used to do. So we don't say M, M. We say because it begins to sound like the word. It helps children to hear how the letter sounds form the words. And this is really, really important, both for reading and writing. So check in at school if you're not comfortable with understanding that or knowing how to pronounce some of those letters. You could go online too. There are lots of guides about how to pronounce, we call them the pure letters. Have some fun as well. There's things like, in English, there's some funny, silly sounds that children quite like playing with, like and z and you can see how the mouth moves and the position of the tongue and where you put your teeth on your lip for. So there's lots of guidance around these things. And as I say, check in at school if you're not sure. And I put a picture of blowing bubbles because actually research has shown that blowing bubbles is a really good way of maneuvering the mouth. You can do it long or you can go. So there are some really familiar things that you could do at home to help your child prepare themselves for being able to say these letters and sounds. And when they're learning letters and sounds, you get different kinds of books coming home from school. So those picture books at the beginning are really for sharing as we talk, and talking with your child about and enjoying the pictures. And you will be reading to your child, encouraging them to join in with you. But these books are the phonic decodable books. And I'm pretty sure that if your child has started school or you're a teacher, you will have a phonic reading program. This one is actually Snappy Sounds from Macmillan, but there are very many available. And you'll notice these are color coded, there's stages, they're very structured. And when you receive, let's say, the first book, which is Sam, when you get a book like that home, it's because your child has been taught the letters and sounds that will enable them to read that book. So nothing coming home, nothing should be sent home if the child can't read it, if it's to practice phonics. So it's two really quite different types of books. Other things you can do and enjoy at home, telling and retelling stories and having pretend play. And I've just put lots of pictures on this slide to remind you that that could be puppets. You don't have to buy puppets. You could draw little faces on your finger and make your own little puppets, or a little paper bag. Doesn't have to be expensive. You can get boxes from the grocery store or the supermarket and have huge fun playing as if it's a boat or a rocket. And of course, you can make little scenes from storybooks as well. This is really to encourage language and vocabulary and understanding, all hugely important. If you don't know, you can see there's a little lad here dressed up as a monster. So again, you don't have to buy those expensive things. You can just make a very simple costume, but children love dressing up, and especially retelling stories that are already familiar to them. This is very important for bilingual and multilingual children because they need to rehearse the language over and over and over. On the right, you can see I've put a screen grab from Instagram, actually, and I follow this family called At Stories by Two. At Stories by 2+1. They're on Instagram and I think they're on TikTok as well. And they are a lovely family based in the States, but of Asian origin. And they really, really have fun with their little girl. And either the dad or the mum are always role playing, pretending to be a naughty child, or pretending to be someone at work who's asking the manager, can they have time off to go to the dentist? And it's just a reminder that you don't need any additional toys or tools. You can actually just sit down and play shops or play cafes or play offices. And that works really, really well. So lots of telling and retelling. And this is an old favourite too. Don't think that just because your child has started school that you'd no longer need to sing songs and chant rhymes. Nursery rhymes are really, really valuable in helping with listening to those letter sounds. So don't think now, oh, we did that when they were 2 and we don't need to do it anymore. It's really powerful. So say the rhymes, you can sing, you can recite little finger rhymes. That's very good for your getting your fingers moving, ready for writing, which we'll talk about in a moment. And also clapping the syllables. That's about hearing the language again. So my name is Gillian, that kind of thing. Or Wincy Spider. Wincy Spider. Those kind of things. They cost nothing and they're hugely valuable, and will ensure that your child tunes into the language. At the same time, remember, you're probably doing those in a home language too, really important, because we want to embed both. Thinking about print, do notice and talk about the print that's around you. So if you're driving to school or you're on the bus or walking along, encourage your child to notice the street signs or the shop signs and point out what they say. And even though those letters will look different to the letters your child is learning at school, it's really important that they understand that print doesn't always look the same. The letter A might be written differently, but it still says A. You can point out capital letters and lowercase letters. And you can have things like these magnetic letters, but you don't have to have those. You can literally write the alphabet on a piece of A4 paper, cut it up, and have with some sticky like blue tack. You could then use those little letter tiles, whether they're on just paper or card. It's really good practice, and you can just pull them out and mix them up and have fun with them. Talk about the shape of those letters. If you're on the beach, you have to use what you have. Use your finger to write in the sand, get some little shells and stones, maybe find some seaweed. So integrating the formation and practice of print with what you have is so much more effective than just sitting down with a pencil and a worksheet and writing the letters over and over and over again. I know in Debbie's session in a moment, she'll talk about rote learning and how it just isn't as effective as having playful interactive learning like these ideas. So do bear that in mind. You really don't need to be spending a lot of money. It's your time with your child and just whatever you have. If you have a tin of buttons, just use the buttons. It's great fun, actually. I thought it would be important just to remind you, and this is just finishing off now because Debbie needs to talk to you about maths and science as well. Remember we talked about progress can be in little tiny steps. We don't really go make huge strides very often. So it's a reminder that the big body skills where we use our arms and our legs and our bodies has an impact on ultimately picking up a little pencil and writing. So we need to develop the big skills and the small body skills. So if you have a hoopla, as in this picture, you might want your child to hop through it. You might want them to run around it. And for sure, if they can't physically run around a hoop, they're not going to be able to pick up a pencil and make a little tiny O on the page. So these are really important steps towards being ready for writing. And you can see also using your whole hand with paint on the table, or if you don't want that much mess, you could do a little sand tray. You could do it in the garden, in the mud. And then there's that stage where children hold a crayon like this with a kind of, we call it the toddler grip, where they're using the whole hand to hold the thing that they're writing with, whether it's a crayon or a pen or a pencil, before they then develop this kind of tripod grip, which is more sophisticated. So don't worry if your child is sort of grabbing at a crayon and scribbling, because that's all part and parcel of their progress, those small steps. And it's not just pens and pencils, it really is paintbrushes and sponges and brushes, sweeping the floor, mops, chalk, chunky chalk, fine chalk, whatever you can put your hands on really, will help children to make marks, which ultimately become important for writing. You can see there's a lovely picture of a little grid and the child can choose a pattern. This is based in a classroom, but you could do it at home. And they just fill the grid with different patterns. Those are a little bit small. You could make them larger if your child is very young. And ultimately, the goal is correct letter formation, because that's what we're aiming for, aren't we? We want children to be able to write the letters correctly and spell. So check in at school if you're not sure what font the children are learning, which letters, what letter style are they using with your children. Make sure that you know that so that you're doing the same at home that's happening at school. And remember that important thing that writing letter B 20 times is really not as effective as playing with those letters. And finally, encourage your child to write, even if you know they actually can't write in a traditional way at the moment. And we call it sharing the pen. So let's say your child's going to a birthday party. You probably already get a birthday card and sit down together, and they might make some marks and you might write the main message in the card. This is shared writing, and this is a really effective way to help your child to gain confidence And it doesn't matter if they are making marks that are unrecognisable, they will tell you with great confidence what it says quite often. And that's again, a really important stage in their progress to becoming sophisticated writers. So do share the pen and share the writing, because, to go back full circle, taking it in turns is more effective than just one person as a parent or a teacher doing all the talking, reading, or writing, or one person working alone. Don't just give them the phone all the time. I know sometimes it's very handy, but if they're just doing that on their own, that's not as effective as if you're interacting with them. So the final message, really, before I hand over to Debbie, who's going to talk to you about the maths and science or understanding the world, is whatever you do at home, don't be intimidated. Whatever you do will make a huge difference to support your child, to helping us to support your child in school. So we definitely are better together, whatever you're doing. And I hope that there's some good ideas for you there to pick up. So without further ado, I will hand over to Debbie and stop sharing my screen. I don't think there's any questions at the moment, but please do pop them in now and when Debbie starts, and we may have some time at the end to answer them. Thanks very much.
Hi everyone. So let me just share my screen with you. There we go. Okay, hopefully you can all see that. And yeah, continue to write in the chat box, though at the moment I can't see it, so I'm sure someone will remind me if I need to. So I'm talking about maths and science this afternoon, and again, it's in preparation, it's all around us. Science is not something unusual or something that we only study in education. It's everywhere, it's all around us. Every experience of our life is based around science. It's not something to be intimidated by any means. We want all of our learning, especially with younger children, to be interesting and engaging. And for me, the only way that I can think that you can really, really, really make learning engaging for any age group is to make it interesting, to make it about them, the world that they're interested in. When I train teachers, I always say, it might be interesting to you, but is it interesting to your 5-year-old, your 6-year-old? And I say that again to parents as well, but you probably know their interests more than anyone, because we're all different, even when we're young. So make it about their world, not something unusual and different and that can only be studied at school. So the content must be real. It must be real to them, something that makes sense to them. And it absolutely has to be hands-on. We have a very, very short attention span, and the younger we are, the shorter it is. So we need it to be hands-on, something changing, moving all the time. And at this age, they're children. They're just children. Make it fun. And generally, as a parent, a grandparent, if you're having fun with it, I can guarantee they will be too. So that sums it up, and it sums up most learning at this age group, to be fair. And the way that I've always done it as a parent and as a grandparent is to look at the outdoor world. It's important in an education, full stop. Lots and lots and lots of research has gone into this, and we now know that the world around us is interesting. Their immediate environment. Go outside. It's free. It's free to go outside. And there are so many different areas of science, maths, and learning language that we can embrace just through being in the outdoor environment. Children love being outside generally. It's different. It makes a change. It's something new. It can be enthralling, stimulating, but definitely thought-provoking. There are some aspects of science that are quite boring, really, if we're just looking at it in a book. But the seasons, for example, the weather, we outside, we're actually experiencing it firsthand, and all our senses are being stimulated. The research tells us that we should be outside at primary age group for at least 3 hours a day, at least. And it's generally, as you as parents and teachers, I bet you know this already, the morning is the best time. Our children are not tired. They're more open to be engaged in new activities and new challenges in the morning. They tend to tire as the days goes on. So some of the content on the curriculum, which can be quite scary to be fair, are there. And how on earth can we teach that to such young people? Again, go outside, get outside and look at what's around us and how that actually crosses into the curricula. I'm pretty certain parents know what their children need to learn. We know what they need to understand at this age. Don't be intimidated by it. The amount of very young children that come up to me and say science and maths generally is hard. Well, how do they know it's hard at this age? They've not started learning it really yet. They think it's hard because that's the impression they're given from people around them. Mums, dads, grandparents, brothers, sisters. They're the ones who tell them that it's difficult. We need to prove to them that actually it's good fun and it is around us all of the time. I get outside with the young people I work with, and I won't lie, this is actually my grandson. We go on what we call a welly walk because I live in the north of England where it seems to be constantly raining and cold and windy as it is today. And all we need for our welly walk is ourselves and a bag. He particularly likes this Macmillan bag, no disrespect, but it's because it's red. And we just allow our children to collect whatever they find interesting, but they have to ask first. We don't want them to pick up certain things that might not make very well for taking home. And we don't really want to remove living organisms from their natural habitat or the place where they live. Otherwise, it does mess up the dynamics of the habitat. He has acquired this hand lens and particularly likes studying things with the hand lens, though I have to say for several weeks he actually had the lens the wrong way round. So it wasn't serving the purpose that it was designed for, but it definitely looked different than just the naked eye. So there he is collecting that leaf. He told me he collected that because it was the biggest one and it was green. That's what he told me at that stage. We can compare the changes in the weather while we're actually outside. We can associate that with symbols. But the use of symbols in the classroom are often because we're not experiencing the weather, the change in weather. Being outside, we can talk about the key vocabulary that we want our children to learn. So we're actually engaged with the key vocabulary. We're not learning words in a book or on a board or on a blackboard, a green board, a whiteboard. We're actually learning language. We're speaking it. We're experiencing it. And it's about the way that you use that language with your children. Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it windy today? Is it dark? Is it sunny? We're asking questions like this and then associating it with the actual weather. Oh, look how sunny it is. It's really, really bright today. Oh, it's windy. It's blowing my coat. It's blowing my scarf. Use that language in everyday experience. Walking to school, walking to the shop, to the market. Is it windy? Is it rainy? Do I need my coat? Do I need boots? Do I need my sandals today and a t-shirt? And then you could actually talk about the different animals that live in different habitats. Why does the polar bear have lots and lots of fur? And people say to me there aren't any polar bears where I live. Well, there aren't any lions where I live, but we learn about why they have such sharp teeth and a loud growling sound to frighten away their predators. What can you hear? Be quiet, listen, ask those delving questions that Jill spoke about. What can you hear? Why is that dog barking? Why is that bird singing? Why is the bird not singing today? And when we've collected everything and we've listened and we've experienced the environment, we talk about it. The talking is the most important part of it. You don't need anything, just to converse and use key language. And then we record it, and we recorded it in that way using our bag. We had our evidence in the bag. And then we took it back and we started to look at different things that we could make. I'm actually whizzing through some of these because I've just realised that I'm sharing the wrong screen with you. This is the more advanced one, which was much longer. Also, while we're out on our welly walk, we can talk about the air and water. That seems quite complex for maybe a 4 or a 5-year-old, but we're breathing in the air. Talk about why we breathe. How do we know we breathe? Hold your chest, feel it rising and falling. Put your hand in front of your mouth and feel the air coming in and going out. Allow them to experience it's just water. Jumping in the water, what does it feel like? What do we need water for? Why is water all around us? What would happen if we didn't have any water? What do we use the water for? Drinking, bathing, washing. We looked at lots of different things when we were out on our walk, and we collected lots of different things as well. We smelt the flowers, we looked at the insects, we talked about why insects were not sat in the middle of the path. We touched the items. We were allowed to explore them. Are they hard? Are they soft? Are they smooth? Are they shiny? And then we used our senses. We made lots of things, which I'll show you in a moment, and we tasted the pie. Encourage students and young people, your children, to look at all the items that are around them, all the different materials that we use in everyday life to make different things. Why do we use those materials? Allow them to experience them. And okay, lots of parents say, yeah, but you can't allow them to work with a can that's been opened. Well, no, you can't. Try and make it as safe as possible. But remember something. As a scientist and a science teacher, remember this. We have wrapped our children, we've protected them so well. I hear people in play areas and outdoor areas saying things like, don't do that, it's dangerous. Don't touch that, it's dangerous. Very rarely backed up with, why? Why is it dangerous? We just tell them it's dangerous. We now have a generation of young people who cannot see the danger. They do not see the hazard. And so if they do study at a higher level in technology, science, many subjects, they're reserved about engaging fully in activities because they think it's dangerous. The opposite end of that scale is they see no danger whatsoever because they've never experienced danger. So it's our responsibility to support our young people in developing a sense and awareness of risk and then how to manage it. And this is what actually keeps them safe. Because in science, it's the child's responsibility to keep themselves safe and everyone else around them. Start developing that from a very early age. Yeah, it's not a good idea to touch that can. It's got really sharp edges. Please be careful with that bottle. Because if you drop that bottle, it might shatter, it might break, and then we'll have lots and lots of little bits of very sharp glass. So be careful when you're handling things like that. Don't put that in your mouth because you could swallow it or it could get stuck. So just don't put it in your mouth. Not don't do that. Don't do that because. And you could talk about the properties of the materials. You could talk about this is very strong, this is waterproof, this cardboard's very flexible, this piece of paper, I can scrunch it up. I can't squash this plastic container. I can't squash this glass bottle. So talk about what the properties are and also At this age, they do need to start learning about what's living, non-living, and once living. Once living is a little bit further along, but it's a great idea if we're looking at wood or twigs or sticks to say, did you know that was once living? It's not living now, it's not breathing, but it was once. Day and night is so easy. We experience it every single day. We look at day and night. We can talk about electricity and the energy from the sun and how we can use this to actually make daylight. On the Welly Walk, we looked at lots of different things, but the important part was when we got home, allowing the children to actually sort their treasures, their finds, to sort them in the manner that they wanted to. The shape, the colour, the size. Is it big? Is it small? Was it smooth? Was it round? Was it sharp, shiny? Looking at the veins in those leaves. Children ask some amazing questions. The questions I've been asked over the last week, being outdoors, are things like, what's a rainbow? What is a cloud? I can't feel the wind, so I can feel the wind. I can't smell it. I can't see it. So what actually is it? Amazing questions. And use those opportunities to try to answer the questions, but to use what they really, really, really want to know to explain the real world around them. For me, maths and science go hand in hand. Maths, science, language. We can't communicate maths and science if we don't have language. We can't evaluate or we can't measure what's happening in science unless we have maths. And behind maths is science also. So can you see that the curriculum, all the different subjects that we have to learn at primary level, it's like a big, massive spider's web. It's all integrated. It all lends itself to another. It's all intertwined. And without one, you can't fully understand the other. So just as I said for science, maths is all around us. It's absolutely everywhere. The time that we wake up in the morning, the time that we start school, how many hours we're at school, how far is it when you're out for a walk? Are we nearly there yet? Where is the shop? Where is the car? All these questions are all based around maths. Maths is interesting. It must be. Otherwise, they would never ask us any questions. We want to increase curiosity about the world. You know, global challenges at the moment. We need students to understand the world and appreciate the world around us so that we can grow up to be young adults who actually want to protect it. The content, again, must be realistic. You, as parents and teachers now who've been with a class for a few weeks or maybe a couple of months, you're beginning to know those children, but parents, definitely, you know your children better than anyone. You know what they're interested in. You know how to make the content real. Make it hands-on experiences. Yeah, okay, I'm an author. I appreciate books massively, hugely. But without the hands-on experience and the hands-on activity, it's not fun. And at the end of the day, these are children. So with some of the things we collected some berries and we made a pie. Where's the maths in this, I'm asked? Well, we did follow a recipe. And in order to follow that recipe, we had to use scales. We had to measure how much flour, how much butter. I'm sure you can personalize this to your household. You can encourage them to follow a simple recipe. Even if they're observing you measuring and they're observing you getting it just right and being accurate, they're understanding the importance of maths in their real world. He also went on to roll out the mixture, and we talked about don't roll it too thin, don't leave it too thick, make sure it's the right shape to fit on top of the pie. How long does it need to be in the oven for? How can we time that? And what temperature should it be? He's 3 years old, and we incorporated all that maths. And again, we allowed them to display their treasures. There are their lovely treasures. And where's the maths in that? Well, how many berries are there? How many pebbles are there? Which is the biggest leaf? Which is the smallest thing that we collected? How many different items did we collect? How many sticks have we got? It's just getting that familiarity, that confidence to use maths, to actually use it in the world around them, for it to become relaxed, second nature, just an ordinary thing to do. Maths in year 1, which I'm guessing lots of your students are, includes so many different things. But at the end of the day, we just want to understand number and counting. You can start looking at shapes. Using building bricks like this is really, really useful because they can actually feel the shapes. So we can talk about it's got an angle, it's round, it's smooth. The pin board is really useful. It's great fun. Using elastic bands is really good fun for some children. One of the children the other day actually decided to twang the elastic band. Okay, learning lots about elastic, but also cut his cheek. Yeah, it was fine after a couple of minutes, but he won't do that again. He learned that that's not a sensible thing to do, and that can be quite painful. But this activity is not just about making a picture of a bicycle. It's actually about the triangles, the circular shape, the squares, the oblongs, the different shapes that can be made, and experiencing those shapes, not just looking at them and learning the name of them. But counting for me it can't be learned through rote learning. Too many times I've heard teachers and parents come to me and say, my son, daughter can count to 10, 15, 5, 7, 9, whatever the number. And they're so proud because they can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They can do that. Put 2 objects in front of them, or 3, or 4, or 5, and ask them how many objects there are. And very few times can they tell me, can they count it. Using activities to actually engage with number, that's where the most fun is. Here we've got putting the exact number of body segments to the caterpillar. Really interesting and engaging because number 1, it's messy and we're using messy paint. The caterpillar's got little wibbly wobbly goggly eyes. That's really good fun and that's funny. And we're allowed to stick our finger in the paint and put it on the drawing. If, as Jill said, if you're not particularly fond of mess, it doesn't have to be messy. There are alternative activities. If not, go outside. Like the one with the little pom-poms. You can use little pom-poms, ball bearings if you can supervise your children and make sure you put them all away safely. Marbles, any tiny object really. Here we're picking them up with forceps or tweezers. You can do that. They've got little circles. You could put the numbers underneath, write the number so that they can learn to associate the number counted with the actual physical written number. Using the tweezers just makes it a little bit more fun. Also promotes fine motor skills as well, which then supports writing later on or at the same time. You can also use a straw, but make sure that your children haven't got any respiratory issues. Maybe not a good idea if they're a little unwell, you know, the wonderful bugs and things that go around when they're starting out in school. You can use a straw to suck the small objects and put them into the categories. They particularly like that as well. It's just something different. You can progress and extend and challenge the learning by getting them to transfer it to a cup or a container, then a cup or a container with a specific number. So they have to count out the objects to match that number. And then we can use this idea even further by putting a simple calculation onto the cups. In this example, we've got 3 plus 1. How many have you got to add to the cup? 1, 2, 3. How many more do you need? 1. Empty them out. How many have you got? And how many more do you need? Remember the single stick that was collected? The one simple little stick that sat there? It's a brilliant, brilliant use of a stick for counting. Not only do you count out loud, but counting the steps and tapping makes a noise. So you're associating with the noise, with the actual movement, with the number. 1, 2, 3. Great fun also, especially if you've got a child who particularly likes making noise with a stick. Lots do. So always count out loud. If you've got a tin tray or a metal container and you've got some small objects like marbles or even stones or pebbles, and count the pebbles into the tin, so it's 1 and it makes that dink noise, 2, dink, dink. And so it's making that association with noise, which can help some children to learn about counting. And it's not rote counting because it doesn't work. We're going to miss these because I'm sorry, I have just worked out the slideshow for you to last the minimum amount of time and then shared the wrong one. So I do apologise. As I said, you know your children. You know what they're interested in. If they're interested in teddies in this case, that's great. Use the teddies. How many teddy bears do you think are sat on that shelf? Get them to predict. This is getting familiar with number and what it actually represents. How many teddies do you think there are on that shelf? Let's count the teddies and point and touch or even pick up each one. 1, 2. Count them physically. And then you can use the same idea to challenge further and say things like, so how many teddies would be half of that number? And then count the teddies and check it. And there's no judgment or anything like that. It's just fun. It's just for fun. Using things like fruit or candies to count, always a great idea. Your most disengaged child will suddenly become more interested if it's something that's interesting to them. Fruit, pom-poms, I don't know, marbles, Lego bricks, building bricks, whatever they're interested in. Collect lots of little jars, write the number below or on it, estimate. How many do you think? How many are there really? How many more would you need to get 5, 6, 7? I talked earlier about measuring longer, shorter, wider, narrower. And then practice using a ruler. There isn't an age really where you can't get used to using a ruler. Days of the week, we'll skip that for a moment. Time is also a difficult one, but there are so many different things that you can use, just like keeping a routine. What time do you go to bed? What time do you get up in the morning? Use the senses. It really does support learning. Here we've got the clippy peg, so they're using those fine motor skills again. Different materials, fabric, felt, lots of different colours. And then we're using glue to actually glue the objects into a table to show the different numbers, which makes a kind of a grid. The smell of the glue. Some people tell me about how they learned to read and enjoyed the fact that the book has a smell. A library has its own distinctive smell. And this can be, when we're comparing learning online and learning using books, it stimulates senses, touching, smelling. Make it into a game. I've used this technique with children from early years right up to adults studying at university. It costs very, very little. If you haven't got the fly squatter thing, swatter, whatever it's called. Use a wooden spoon, works just as well. Or make a little paddle. Getting them involved and engaged and active is just fun. So stick lots of different pieces of paper on a wall with different numbers on it. Take it in turns to roll a dice. Whatever number comes on the dice, you have to be the one to swap the correct number. It's just really, really, really good fun. But remember, don't lose the opportunity of talking about the outcome of the game. Did you get them all right? How many did you get right? How many did you get wrong? Who got the most right? Which numbers did we find the most difficult to recognise? Conversations like that just really, really help us. We also used a hand lens, which is absolutely not essential. I acquired this hand lens and it was great fun. Doesn't really matter because for the first few weeks he didn't even use it the right way around, as I said before, but he used it and he realised that we talked about things because it made it look bigger, smaller, big, small. These things are all key vocabulary for maths and used extensively throughout. This is just an example. He's observing this stone, which he just picked up and was particularly interested in. But he was able to compare it to other things and say, yes, it's bigger, it's smaller. This is round. This is not round. And then on to shadows. It's not just about science. With these young people, what we did, we actually helped them to measure their height using the tape measure and the door frame, actually. And we recorded their height. And then we asked questions like, predict if your shadow will be the same size as you. And normally they will say yes. It is me. Outside, some chunky chalk, though I am told that in some countries it's not a good idea, but well, it rains where I live a lot, so it washes it away, and I'm sure you could erase it quite easily. Allow them to make the shadows and have fun with shadows, moving around. Can they make the shadows move? But then stand in the same position, stand tall, stand there doing like a star shape, whatever position they were in that you took their measurement of their height. Draw around, take it in turns to draw around each other's shadow and measure the size of the shadow. Is it longer? Is it smaller? Is it shorter? Is it bigger? And then one of them said, does my shadow stay the same all the time? I don't know. Let's explore it. So it took a whole day to go out every hour and measure the length of their shadows. And guess what? Their shadow changed, which was phenomenal to them. And it was nothing like the size of their original shadow. Why did that happen? Why would that happen? How is that even possible? And these are the questions that they asked. This young man thinks he's Superman. Obviously, he's flying above all the buildings. But then we talked about, well, is that fair, really? Is that right? And even though he's as young as he is, we had a conversation about scale. The houses are not drawn to scale. He is much, 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 much bigger than the houses. But it was good fun, and it cost nothing. It cost some chalk that was already laying around. In fact, I think one of those was actually drawn by a stone that had been found. That's the end of my maths and science. Now, you've all been very quiet in the chat. Has anyone got any questions, any comments? Don't forget, as Macmillan said at the beginning, you might have some ideas, some questions that will lead us to develop other webinars that can be supportive of you. So I hope you as parents start to have more confidence in what you're doing with your children because you know them better than anyone else, and just enjoy. But I'd be very interested to see if you've got any more questions for us. So thank you so much for giving up your precious time to be with us here today. And I hope you have got something out of it.
Thank you very much, Debbie and Jill, for your time today. Thank you for everybody who joined us for today's session. There's just a couple of minutes, so if you have got anything you want to put in the chat, then I'm sure Debbie and Jill will be very happy to answer it. You will receive a certificate, some handouts which you may like to use in the classroom or hand on to parents. And for parents, you might well like to use these. And we'll make sure there's a copy of the webinar for any teachers who are joining this session so that you can share this with your parents as well. Well, I don't think there doesn't appear to be any questions. So thank you again, Debbie and Jill. Thank you for everyone who enjoyed us wherever you are in the world. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye.